Hi, this is Lori Rehfeldt with God, Aliens, and a Cup of Coffee. And I am here today with part two with this with Candice Sanderson.
You know, what I find interesting, well, there's a lot I find interesting about your story, but one thing you talk about is feeling that atmospheric difference.
Mm-hmm.
Now, since my opening to spirit, I have realized that a lot of what I've experienced, I mean, it's beautiful and it's great, but it's not as woo-woo as I thought. I
Mm-hmm.
have now learned to really see the world through the lens of energy. In fact, my first book, The Reluctant Messenger, I start off and I put a quote in there from Tesla, who says, Nikola Tesla, if you
Uh-huh.
want to find the secrets of the universe, think in terms of energy, frequencies, and vibrations.
Mm-hmm.
So as we step outside of our physical bodies, our senses become much larger than what they were. And we can engage in something that's called synesthesia, where the senses actually blend. But with you, Lori, you automatically sensed that and realized that and knew that you were crossing into another dimensional space.
Mm-hmm.
Once you do that, and it's like, oh, all of a sudden, I feel like I've hit this wall, this barricade, this veil that separates me from another aspect, whether it's another dimension, whether it's stepping into where angels are, but you know you've hit a spot that is going to allow you to step into more of who you really are.
Mm-hmm.
And you've done that, you recognize it. One thing that's kind of cool about that, though, is once you've done that, once you've made a connection, and not even the wonderful stories you're talking about, but let's say, I mean, like my husband died when he had just turned 35, and, you
Wow.
know, it just devastated me. But I
Oh.
see him all the time now. But one of the first times I met with him was in a dream right after he passed. And that's where a lot of people will make a connection, because when you're dreaming, your ego is shut down. So you don't have your ego judging and saying, this can't happen. This is just wishful thinking.
Mm-hmm.
No, you just go with the flow. But once you've made that connection, whether it's in the dream state or whether it's you on an insurance call, the messengers tell me you can go back and do that again. Once you connect, there is an electromagnetic marker that is laid down,
Mm-hmm.
and you can find that again. It's like, you know, if you're in a field of snow and you walk one way, you can see where you've been. You just follow your footsteps back to where your body is. And that's important, because if people are starting to do this, it's like, whoa, well, what if I can't find my body? Well, of course you can. You just turn around and come back. But the more you connect to that other side, and again, it may begin in the dream state, the deeper that channel becomes,
Mm-hmm.
and the more you're able to use your senses differently, and you start to recognize these extraordinary spaces. You know, the other dimension isn't really out there or far away, or the other side isn't, you know, beyond the
Mm-hmm.
stars. It's right next to us. We are in our dense physical body, so we don't pay attention to it because we don't know how. But once we learn that we can step through the heart, we can step outside of this, we start realizing that we are more than our physical bodies. And in
Absolutely.
doing so, we can make these extraordinary connections, you know, to angels, to guides, to people who have passed before. And we become, we start gaining a skill set. You know,
Absolutely.
you could probably now, whether you, I mean, you could even like set an intention. You're out on a walk one day And then you can ask for that other dimensional space, or where do I need to go today? What should I be doing? And allow guidance just to carry you on those emotional vibrations and frequencies
Hmm.
to where you need to go. Then you feel that barrier, that veil, and you can choose to step into it, and then your whole world will just expand. I mean, you can
Yeah.
see what your stories, they're marvelous, they're wonderful. That's great.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I just think this is, for me, it's been something that's been happening ever since I was a teeny tiny little girl. I mean, it's just, been with me. And in some cases, there have been many times where I've tried to suppress it. That's why when I saw your book, I said, I have got to meet this woman. And
Oh,
and I'm
I'm so glad that you do. In fact, I think we first met on Twitter when we started connecting, but
yes.
so many people are like you, Lori, because they've grown up with this, and they've always had these abilities and this skill
Hmm.
set, but not me. I was so far from it. I was always interested in those kind of things,
Hmm.
but I didn't have any kind of skills whatsoever. And then all of a sudden, I just fell. I was just on this precipice, and I just tumbled and fell into it. And my life has changed so much. And I love it. I've just stepped into more of whom I really am. But it's just great. But I already lost my train of thought here. But what I was going to say is, you came into this world with some of those skills, and we all do actually. But
Yes.
the training knocked mine out of it, and I never believed it whatsoever. So I've always wondered, why someone like me, why would I open up? And I do understand, Donna Rebideau helped me understand. My training as a psychologist actually helped with that.
Mhm.
But those veils between the dimensions are thinning. And what the messengers have told me is that Earth is also going through a transition to higher
Mhm.
vibrational frequencies.
Mhm.
And as our dear planet makes her transition, she's bringing us along with her. So, what that means practically are people like me who were totally grounded in the earth plane. Now I've been able to step across those barriers at will and see the larger picture. So these things are opening for more and more people, which is a beautiful thing to happen.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. It was funny is I remember the first time, one of the first times that I experienced something that was really kind of interesting was when I was at a time of my life that in 1978 I enlisted in the United States Air Force and went into a career field that probably only 2% of the women were in the career field. So if you have 100 men, you got two women, that kind of thing. And it wasn't fun. It was really, really upsetting. And what happened with me is that I tried so hard to at least come across as logical and pragmatic and um, see things black and white. But while that was going on, I'm at RAF Bentwaters in the most haunted county in the world, and I'm dealing with there's this crazed monster trying to come out of this pond that I couldn't see the pond until I got Google Maps about 40 years later. That was trying to scare me, and then one day, and I can't tell anybody about these things, and then another time I'm experiencing I'm in a weapons storage area. It was non-nuclear, and I because women weren't allowed to guard anything more than couldn't guard nuclear bombs. And so I'm in this other area by myself, middle of the night, really, really cold out. I got this little gate shack. I've got my M16 rifle on my shoulder, and I'm heading out to check all the doors on these bunkers. And I get I probably take about 30, 40 steps away from my gate shack when all of a sudden I see a flash in my head, and it was this tall, dark, praying mantis. I guess I call it a mantid, pacing back and forth and telling me, don't go. That's all it said. That's all he said, don't go. I made an about face, went right back to my gate shack because I did not want to have to walk up to him, and I just didn't have that wherewithal. And I think they knew. He knew that I was scared. That he knew my sensitivity level and whatnot. But apparently, I really believe that the atmosphere knew that I was receptive, like I was an antenna to all of it. It knew it, and I was trying my best to be black and white, pragmatic. If you can't touch it, taste it, feel it, uh, smell it, listen to it, see it with your eyes. But and then I saw the UFO that flew over the base, and for me it was in February 1980, and I had to report it. This is not, it's an unknown aircraft. I had to report it. It flew low. It flew about 20, 30 feet off the ground, and it was big. And then it broke into three pieces, and then it shot up in the sky. And I didn't want to report it because, again, I'm trying to be, everything's black and white. If it didn't land, I can't have any proof that I saw it, except the fact that I wasn't by myself. And that, unfortunately, that's just the way it was then, and it still is now, that when you are put into a position that you have to report something that you really don't want to report because of the way people who are black and white, pragmatic, well, I don't know, what have you been smoking or drinking or whatnot, and it's it was disheartening in many, many ways. It took me a long, long, long time to even talk about it and to get it out. But there were times when that energy that we were talking about was not a benevolent energy. It's like, okay, it was an energy that didn't want me there, and I'm thinking, well, fine, I'm counting my days down. I'll be away from England before I know it, and it was just, but sadly, I loved England. And when I was off the base, I felt peace. That, again, that vortex thing, as soon as I went onto the base, I was wrapped into something that was not a good energy. And then when I left the base, it washed off me. It was as if that was my reprieve, is when I was able to live off base and go home and live among a community of people.
I have a question for you. That praying mantis type creature that you saw that said, "Don't come here, don't go there."
Uh-huh.
Could there have been a protective quality where that entity is saying,
He was pacing and thinking about something really hard. It was as if he didn't want me to interrupt him. It was more or less but it wasn't like a scary mean, like don't go, get out. It wasn't anything like that. It was more or less of a really, don't go because you don't want to see me. That was part of it. Don't go. It's like, and it wasn't like I cared that I don't want to scare you. It wasn't anything to do with that. It was more or less, don't go. You just be disrupting my thought process of what was going on. And I do think that he was above ground level. I think that there was something underneath the ground. They had just recently upgraded that area. So, I just think that he needed to be away from whoever was down there the base underneath or whatever to say, uh, and I'm guessing because I don't know if there's a base under there. I don't have my shovel, but I just felt it was he was up on top, and I guess he just didn't expect, maybe he didn't expect me to really do my job in the middle of the night. I don't know, but
Right. And he probably didn't expect that you could see him because you've already told me that you have some additional skills that many of us do not have. You know,
yeah.
I dare say other people had been there while this creature was there and they probably did not see him.
Mm-hmm.
So he
Mm-hmm.
probably didn't expect not so much that your presence would be there, but that your presence observed him, could
Mm-hmm.
actually see him.
Yeah. 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 And this is all interestingly, this area that I was working was right beside. I mean, on the other side of the fence was Rendlesham Forest, where a lot of where the big UFO sighting was seen in December of 80. My UFO sighting was seen in the same location, except it flew over the base in February of 1980. So there I've been trying to tell people for decades now that, there's definitely more to the story that meets everyone still has it that it happened in 3, 4 days in December, when in actuality it happened even before that. But sometimes it's like Lori wants to get her story out too, that kind of thing. But I, I find what you're going through, the reluctant messenger, I'm probably more in line for that than I am with UFOs. It's more or less the fact that it's these entities that want me to be aware of them, and I think they can clearly know that I'm sensitive enough to pick up their frequencies and their you know um you know when you walk in a
Right.
place and oh, it's a good vibe, good vibrations, and then
And
you go into a
that's
place.
so true
Hmm.
because it is all energy vibrations. And there will be people that I'll talk to that they've read my books and it's like, oh, I don't really believe all that energy stuff.
Hmm.
But think about it, that's our radar that we've had for our entire lives. We don't always pay attention to it.
Hmm.
But you can ask anyone, if you walk into a room and there are two people sitting there, just sitting, but they've just had an argument, you can feel it. And I'm not talking about their body language or they look angry, but
Hmm.
no, just walking in the room,
Yep.
you can feel the density, you can feel the anger, you can feel the discord
Yeah.
because they've just had an argument. You can leave the room, come back, and even if they're gone, there's still an imprint there
Hmm.
because their energy is still there.
I worked at the U.S. Department, and I went to the regional office in San Francisco, and I just walked through the doors, and I could feel how toxic the energy was. And I did talk to some people, and I found out, yeah, it was really, I couldn't wait to get out of there because it was horrible. I don't know how people could, how they were able to function there. The other place that I felt that, and this is interesting, is the U.S. Department of Agriculture building in D.C. because I was applying for a job there. But as soon as I walked through that door, and I really think it has to do with um, the way farmers, the way agriculture treats animals, and I picked up on the agony and the cruelty, and I'm thinking, I'm
Right.
like, I can't work here. I can't.
Right. You're leading with your heart. Your
Mhm.
heart is telling you, stay away from this, and you're
Yeah.
paying attention to it. But because once we realize everything is energy, and that's why we have these feelings, when you walk in, or the opposite is true. You meet someone you've never met before, and all of a sudden you feel like they're like a long lost friend. That's the energy too. But
Yeah.
once we realize we're all energy, we can then use that to our advantage. I retired a few years ago as a psychologist, and in my last job, I was a clinical psychologist, but I was working in a school setting also as a school psychologist.
Mm-hmm.
And anytime, Lori, they would want me in a meeting, that was never a good thing because it meant there was a problem. Either a student had a problem with the teacher, or a teacher had a problem with the parent, or whatever it is. There was always a problem. And by the time I got to a meeting with me, the psychologist, tensions were high. So this is what I would do. Now, I had already opened, but I couldn't tell people that. But
Mm-hmm.
I would use the skills that the messengers were sharing with me. I would go into the meeting room beforehand, and I would just like clear the room with energy. I just would use my heart and
Mm-hmm.
send out positive energy. As each person came in and sat down, I would look them straight in the eyes, shake their hand. I would smile, introduce myself.
Mm-hmm.
As I did that, I intentionally sent energy from my heart to their heart.
Wow.
So, from an observer perspective, and for those who can see energy, you see a table, people are surrounding the table, and there's my heart energy going out to each one of them.
Mm-hmm.
And as a parent might be sharing and they're tearful or they're angry, I would just push more and more love and energy toward them.
Mm-hmm.
By the end of the majority of the meetings, people were happy, they were smiling. We would resolve the issues. Now, from one perspective, that's what I always did. I would meet with people, we would have a positive outcome. That's great. But now I had the skill set where I could actually use my energy and call in my angels and guides and
Mm-hmm.
have them help by calling in the other person's angels and guides, so that we all could literally rise above the situation, bring in higher vibrational frequencies, not the frequencies of being depressed or being angry,
Mm-hmm.
but of love and trying to find a resolution. And things worked out so much easier and better. But this is something we can all do once we realize there's some sort of negative feeling that we're getting. We can protect ourselves by building a bubble
Mm-hmm.
of
Mm-hmm.
energy around us. We can rise above it and call in divinity, divine help,
Mm-hmm.
angels, guides. We can help manipulate that energy so that everybody is on a higher wavelength.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful. You know, I think you are an incredible guest, but more importantly, I've just made a new friend, and I so appreciate you. And
Oh, thank you. I feel the same way.
uh,
That's wonderful.
we've got a lot more to talk about, and I so appreciate that you gave me the opportunity to share my stories that really piggyback on what you're talking about. And I know when Donna comes on, because she's at the point now where she can actually, I got a video of it. She had all these orbs um,
Oh, you
going.
have no idea what door you're opening when you start talking about orbs. I will have to share with you some of my orb photography. I've asked before I was taking a picture of a friend and I said, ask for an orb to come and land in your hand. And there's a picture of the orb in her hand. I've got a picture of a 3-foot orb when I asked for it to come in. So this is going to be
Oh,
so much
yeah,
fun. I
yeah,
can't
yeah.
wait.
It's gonna be fun because Donna, and most of us are who are even have been experiencing it for a while. It's like getting a gift that you have to practice, or there's a little bit of a learning curve, and But I will definitely share that orb experience, that video with you. Well, I thank you again. And this is God, Aliens, and a Cup of Coffee, even though I've been drinking my Diet Coke. And I look forward to our conversation again.